R.C. Bhargava. Impossible to Possible. Maruti's incredible success and how it can change India. Few stories of independent India have defied expectations as dramatically as the rise of Maruti. What began as a modest public sector experiment in the early 1980s, launched at a time when private cars were dismissed as wasteful luxuries, went on to redefine how manufacturing could work in the country. The environment was stacked against success. Industrial policy discouraged car production, imports of technology were tightly restricted, and existing manufacturers were struggling with outdated designs, poor quality, and unreliable service. Add to this the labor unrest and inefficiencies that plagued much of Indian industry, and the odds of building a thriving, competitive car company seemed impossibly slim. And yet, within 4 decades, Maruti had turned India into one of the world's largest automobile producers, exporting hundreds of thousands of cars each year and reshaping consumer expectations at home. In this blink, you'll learn how a bold partnership with Suzuki took shape against all warnings, how customer-first thinking rewrote the rules of a stagnant industry, and how one company became the benchmark for efficiency, quality, and trust in Indian manufacturing. Building the team that made Maruti work. When you look at the rise of Maruti, it's tempting to focus on technology, factories, or government policy. But the real difference came from the people at the top and the way they worked together. Leadership shaped the decisions, culture, and direction of the enterprise. At the time, public sector companies in India were rarely models of efficiency. Leaders were often appointed for political reasons, with short tenures and little incentive to change the system. Most were weighed down by red tape, poor quality, and limited innovation. Private companies, many family-run, had more freedom but still operated under restrictive policies that kept them far from global competitiveness. Against this backdrop, the creation of Maruti was highly unusual. It wasn't part of a planned industrial strategy, but born from Indira Gandhi's determination to carry forward her late son's dream of making cars in India. That gave the company freedoms no other state enterprise enjoyed, including a partnership with Suzuki of Japan, which took a 40% stake and brought modern technology and management practices. The leadership team that emerged was unlike anything else in Indian industry. At its head was V. Krishnamurthy, who had already earned a reputation for reviving Bharat Heavy Electricals and now brought his energy and discipline to building India's first mass-market carmaker. On the partner side, Osamu Suzuki chose to personally commit himself, flying to India regularly, reviewing operations in detail, and guiding strategy far beyond what was typical for a foreign executive. Another key figure was R.C. Bhargava, who left a secure and prestigious civil service career to join the fledgling company, determined to prove skeptics wrong. Together, these leaders created a culture of independence, trust, and motivation that cut through bureaucracy and allowed the company to start production on time, an unheard-of feat in India's public sector. The lesson is clear. The right mix of committed leaders, aligned incentives, and mutual trust can overcome even the toughest constraints and build the foundations of long-term success. With the right leaders in place, the next challenge was to turn an ambitious vision into a working company that could deliver cars Indian consumers actually wanted. How Maruti got off the ground. To understand how Maruti became India's dominant carmaker, you have to start with how it was built from scratch in the early 1980s. Back then, India's industrial policy was firmly rooted in central planning. Car production was tightly restricted, and the few private manufacturers that existed had been producing outdated models for decades. Against this backdrop, a new state-owned company was set up on land once belonging to Sanjay Gandhi's failed car project, with the bold goal of producing 100,000 cars a year. The initial plan was to partner with Renault to produce a large family sedan, but closer analysis showed the numbers didn't add up. Manufacturing costs would be too high, exports would have to be subsidized, and the entire venture risked collapse. Instead of pressing ahead, the fledgling management team commissioned a market survey, something unheard of in Indian industry at the time. It turned out consumers wanted a small, modern, affordable, fuel-efficient car. This finding changed everything and pushed the team to look beyond Europe to Japan, where compact cars and lean production systems were world-class. After failed talks with Volkswagen, Suzuki Motor Corporation stepped in. In 1982, a joint venture was signed, giving Suzuki 40% equity and the responsibility for technology transfer. What followed was a race against the clock, designing the plant, importing equipment, establishing vendors, building a nationwide sales and service network, and negotiating new policies such as lower import duties for fuel-efficient cars. Weekly review meetings kept the project on track, while advance bookings from eager customers provided the funds to maintain independence from government financing. On December 14, 1983, the first Maruti 800 rolled out on schedule. For the first time in India's public sector, a project had successfully launched without delay, within budget, and with a product that truly matched customer expectations. That moment set the tone for everything that followed. Creating a new culture of performance. When India set out to create its small car, the challenge wasn't just technical, it was also cultural. Most public sector companies of the time treated profit with suspicion, prioritized welfare spending, and allowed delays to be explained away by procedure. To succeed, the new venture needed a radically different mindset, one that treated profitability, productivity, and accountability as non-negotiable. Working with Suzuki provided both the model and the discipline. Japanese management methods emphasized teamwork, continuous improvement, and responsibility at every level. That meant changing how employees thought about their roles. Recruits were told from day one that excuses would no longer do. The job was to achieve results. Managers were expected to solve problems rather than pass them upward, and not failing quickly became a matter of pride. Training visits to Japan reinforced these lessons, showing firsthand how systems and collaboration could outperform individual brilliance. Visible symbols of change underscored the difference. Open offices, shared canteens, and uniforms erased status barriers, while weekly management committee meetings spread accountability across divisions. Promotions were tied to merit and performance, not seniority, and employees were rotated across functions to prepare them for leadership. Even junior staff members were pushed to make decisions, supported by a flatter structure that valued expertise over hierarchy. Productivity was driven further by incentives. A scheme tied bonuses directly to the number of saleable cars per employee, encouraging punctuality, teamwork, and higher attendance. Within a few years, worker bonuses exceeded their base salaries, and attendance levels rose beyond 95%. Preventive maintenance shutdowns, faster depreciation policies, and early adoption of IT kept operations reliable, flexible, and modern. The outcome was a company that stood apart from India's public sector culture. Employees gained upward mobility, management secured resilience, and the organization proved that disciplined systems and shared accountability could power sustained success. Fostering trust on the factory floor. When a new company sets out to change an entire industry, technology alone is never enough. What really determines success is whether the people inside the factory believe they're working as partners, not opponents. In the early days of Maruti, one of the biggest challenges was changing a culture of suspicion between management and workers into one of trust and cooperation. Without that shift, no amount of Japanese manufacturing practices could take root. The process began with visible symbols of equality. Managers wore the same uniforms as workers, used the same canteens and toilets, and followed the same rules on punctuality and working hours. These gestures showed that every role was valued and that leadership was willing to live by the standards it expected from others. A Japanese director even mopped the shop floor himself to reinforce the message that no task was beneath anyone. Open communication was equally important. Regular meetings with the union helped workers understand how profits were made, why cost control mattered, and how their own job security depended on competitiveness. Instead of keeping financial and operational realities hidden, management explained them in simple terms. Workers responded positively once they saw that cooperation could directly improve their wages, career opportunities, and long-term security. Concrete welfare measures reinforced this trust. Workers were encouraged to buy their own homes through cooperative housing schemes, turning what had traditionally been rental colonies into assets for families. Schools were set up in company-built townships, ensuring children, especially girls, had access to high-quality education. These moves made it clear that growth would be shared. The results spoke for themselves. A single independent union emerged, free from outside political influence, and supervisors were promoted from the shop floor based on performance rather than credentials. Over time, workers became active partners in driving productivity and competitiveness, proving that lasting success comes from building a culture where everyone sees their future in the company's growth. Training is the engine of change. When you're trying to build a world-class company in a place where the old rules of industry were defined by conflict, inefficiency, and low standards, the single most powerful lever you have is training. Maruti's early leadership understood that unless employees could unlearn outdated habits and see a better way of working, new technology and ambitious targets would never take hold. That's why so much energy went into reshaping people's skills, mindset, and motivation. Most of the initial recruits came from India's public sector, where managers had little exposure to Japanese practices and worker management relations were marked by suspicion. Convincing them that harmony and discipline could raise productivity seemed nearly impossible. The breakthrough came when employees were sent to Japan. Thanks to the support of Suzuki and a Japanese government program that covered living expenses, hundreds of engineers, managers, and eventually workers were able to spend months inside Japanese factories. They saw spotless shop floors, trains running on time, and teams where every worker took ownership of quality and productivity. That experience changed everything. Returning employees brought back new standards of punctuality, discipline, and teamwork. At home, 8-hour shifts meant exactly that, and productivity leapt ahead of most Indian factories. Workers learned to stop lines if defects appeared, make suggestions for improvement, and master multiple tasks. Engineers shed any reluctance to work with their hands after seeing Japanese managers do the same. Motivation was reinforced by a larger purpose. Employees weren't just assembling cars, they were modernizing India's automobile industry. Open offices, trust in junior staff, and the excitement of introducing mass production at scale created a culture where results mattered more than hierarchy. Gradually, even workers without degrees achieved global benchmarks, offering proof that when training, trust, and a sense of mission come together, extraordinary performance follows. The competitive edge of continuous improvement. Why do some companies keep raising their standards while others slip into mediocrity? The answer often comes down to how they think about improvement. Competition forces organizations to sharpen their performance, but it doesn't explain why certain countries or companies surge ahead. What made Japan remarkable after World War II was the adoption of a simple but powerful philosophy. Everything can be improved all the time. That principle, known as Kaizen, was successful because leaders believed workers at every level had the capacity to spot better ways of doing things. Instead of assuming workers lack the knowledge to contribute, managers encouraged them to use their hands-on experience to refine processes. With training and encouragement, workers made countless small changes that, when added together, made Japanese manufacturing the most competitive in the world. Importantly, Kaizen also carried the reminder that success is never final. Even when Suzuki had been applying it for decades, the company pushed for campaigns like shaving 1 gram of weight from every component, showing that no improvement was too small to matter. The contrast in India was stark. Government systems clung to rules and precedents, leaving little space to question procedures or correct inefficiencies. In such an environment, even cost-saving innovations could trigger allegations of wrongdoing, discouraging initiative. Industry also struggled, since managers rarely believed workers could improve operations, and employees saw little link between company performance and their own futures. At Maruti, change began with trust and exposure. Engineers visiting Japan saw workers actively shaping production, and back home, suggestion schemes and quality circles gave employees a platform to contribute. Early ideas were modest, but steady encouragement improved both quality and impact. Linking participation to rewards, promotions, and even international competitions created momentum. Over time, Kaizen became part of the company's DNA, showing that competitiveness thrives when improvement is treated as a shared responsibility rather than a management directive. Centering the customer. In the India of the early 1980s, buying a car was an ordeal. With only 2 outdated models on the market, customers faced unreliable vehicles, dismissive dealers, and service that left much to be desired. Decades of centralized planning had created an economy where producers decided what to make, and consumers had no influence. Shortages were routine, competition was absent, and companies had little incentive to improve. When Maruti stepped into this environment, it introduced a new approach that would change how cars were built and sold, and how consumers were treated. As you've learned, one of the first moves was to actually ask customers what they wanted. A nationwide survey revealed a clear preference for a small, affordable, fuel-efficient car, not the large Renault model the government had initially chosen, which led to the launch of the Maruti 800. Demand far exceeded supply, but instead of letting scarcity breed corruption, a transparent booking system was introduced. Customers registered in advance, paid a deposit that earned interest, and cars were allotted through a computerized process witnessed by the press and even senior officials. This fairness built trust and set Maruti apart. The focus on the customer extended beyond the product. Dealerships were designed to be welcoming, with trained staff, waiting areas, and proper service facilities. Workshops followed standardized practices, and customers could observe their cars being serviced without entering the shop floor. Genuine spare parts were made widely available, reducing accidents caused by counterfeits. Even the way cars were transported was modernized, using trucks and rail instead of long drives that wore down the vehicles before they were delivered. By making customer satisfaction central to every decision, from design to delivery, Maruti reshaped expectations in an industry long resistant to change. This shift secured loyalty and demonstrated that putting the consumer first could create success that stands the test of time. The main takeaway of this blink to Impossible to Possible by R.C. Bhargava is that lasting success comes from aligning a bold vision with disciplined execution, trust, and a relentless focus on improvement. What began as a highly unlikely experiment in India's car industry became a story of global competitiveness because leaders dared to challenge outdated practices, treated workers as true partners, invested in training, and made customer needs the foundation of every decision. With a clear purpose and systems that reward performance and continuous learning, even the toughest challenges can become opportunities. Proof that remarkable results are possible anywhere. Okay, that's it for this blink. We hope you enjoyed it. If you can, please take the time to leave us a rating. We always appreciate your feedback. See you soon.